Welcome to episode 2 of Alpha Whisperers Genesis, where we explore the hidden world of the quiet power behind the power, the hidden dynamics shaping leadership and decision-making at the highest levels of business, government, and beyond. I'm Dr. Laura Sicola.
And I'm Janet C. Salazar, creator of the Alpha Whisperers brand. Today, we are going to talk about the anatomy of the Alpha Whisperer. This means we're going to deep dive into the DNA and the profile of alphas and the DNA and the profile of their whisperers.
Yes, we're going to break down the traits that make the alphas, or the top leaders, and their whisperers, or their advisors, so influential, and the chemistry between them that really makes them such a powerful combination. We'll also look at some historical examples of that alpha-whisperer relationship along the way.
Okay, Lara, yes, let's get started.
All right. So to understand alpha whisperers, I think we need to start with an understanding of who the alphas are that they serve. So Janet, what are some of the most common characteristics of a top alpha?
Well, Laura, top alphas have that take charge, go-getter attitude because alphas are driven to lead. They like to take control in high-stakes situations. Alphas also love the limelight. Many of alphas love visibility and recognition. And they love to be the center of attention.
I don't know anything about that. I can't relate to that whatsoever. Can you? No. You either? No. All right. So great. Love the limelight. What else?
Yes. Alphas have that intrinsic megaphone mindset. And what I mean by this is that they're vocal and assertive, and they really love to use their platform to make bold statements and command attention. These are alphas for you.
So where being the center of attention, or at least having people's attention, is not something to be avoided. They're comfortable there. They desire it. And it's not just about the attention for its own sake, but they've got a message. They want to get it out to as many people as possible. There's that passion and drive behind it. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes. It's just naturally built into the DNA of the alphas.
Okay. Anything else?
Oh, this next one is very interesting. Because alphas have very strong personalities, they have that tendency to be autocratic.
Ooh, okay, that sounds dangerous. How does that happen?
Well, it's that approach where the leader or the alpha can be very decisive. I mean, decisiveness is good, but taken to extreme, it boils down to it's my way or the highway. They don't care what other people say or think or do. They pretty much subscribe to that principle. I'm right, and this is what I want. You know, as a matter of fact, there's actually a specific section in my book of these kinds of alphas whom I call rogue alphas.
Ooh, that's a great title. Sure, the rogues. They've gone rogue. The alpha went rogue.
Rogue. And throughout history, and even, during our times right now, I won't mention names, but we see a lot of them maintaining their reputation as what I call rogue alphas.
Sure. Okay. So an alpha in general is someone who takes charge, who likes the spotlight, who likes having the microphone, wants to get their message out far and wide, and that decisiveness, but which can, at a not healthy level, be taken to an extreme and kind of result in that my way or the highway philosophy, becoming that rogue alpha. And that's what we want to avoid, of course. The good alphas are not the rogues. That's we're trying to distinguish between the two. Sound right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now, one thing that I thought was interesting when you and I have talked is that a lot of alpha whisperers, a lot of these advisors, are actually alphas in their own right. So how does that work?
Well, let's cite one good example, Laura, and these are the ambassadors. For example, within my space and my experience working with them, these are the United Nations ambassadors, right? Representative of their countries to the United Nations. So as an ambassador, they're actually flexing both their alpha and whisperer muscles.
Yes.
When they are at the United Nations interacting or representing their countries at the General Assembly, for example, doing these resolutions and talking to or postulating with the other ambassadors and representatives of other countries, they are flexing their alpha muscle.
Sure. And then there are whisperers at the same time?
And they are whisperers at the same time when they then have to report back to the president of their countries all these matters or policies that they took up with their colleagues at the United Nations, they become alpha whisperers when they talk to their presidents, because then they advise the president of their country as far as these international policies at the UN, the development of whatever resolution they are wanting to present to the United Nations, etc. So in that capacity, they are the alpha whisperers.
Okay, so it sounds like it's natural that whisperers would have a lot of those alpha qualities, at least sometimes. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely.
And which qualities would those be?
Both of them are typically highly intelligent, very strategic, and really driven by a desire to shape decision-making. And in this context of leadership, we're talking about decision-making at the top level.
So outcome-oriented. They want to get those results.
Yes.
Okay. And then what are some of the core traits that distinguish alpha whisperers in particular from their alphas?
I'm always excited to talk about this, and this is where we really identify and differentiate the alpha whisperers, right? So the whisperers like to work in the shadows or, behind the scene. That's a topmost characteristic or trait of an alpha whisperer. They avoid the limelight and really a lot of times just prioritize influence over recognition. So let me repeat that once again.
Yeah.
Alpha whisperers prioritize influence over recognition.
Okay, so that's huge. If the alphas by nature typically really want and crave the spotlight, the whispers themselves do not have that need, or at least in this context, they don't. So behind the scenes is where they do their work.
Exactly, yeah. It has been like this historically that FDR even said that advisors need a passion for anonymity. So even before, they've always been labeled or categorized as these influencers behind the scene working in the shadows.
Yes. Okay, so the lack of the need for public credit.
Yes.
For something, even if they had a lot to do with it, they let the alpha take the credit and, for that matter, the blame if things go wrong. But they're behind the limelight. It reminds me of the movie. Did you ever see the movie Wag the Dog back in the 90s?
No, unfortunately, but you have to tell me more about that.
Okay, so real quick, it's Dustin Hoffman plays an advisor to the president, and no, I take that back. Robert De Niro plays the advisor, and he hires Dustin Hoffman, who is a Hollywood producer, to manufacture a fake war, just to have the optics of the war so that the president can increase his popularity. So they create this whole thing. It's back in the Desert Storm kind of era, and they do a great job of convincing the world that we truly were at war with Albania, of all completely random places. And in the end, when it was all done, Dustin Hoffman, the producer, was like, oh, I can't wait to tell everybody about this. This is such a great story. And De Niro said, you can't tell anybody about this. Yes, you were effectively the alpha whisperer. You created all this stuff in the back, but no, you can never tell this story. And Dustin Hoffman's great line was just, but I want the credit. It's like it was the best work he'd ever did. He wanted the credit. Needless to say, they took care of him afterwards, shall we say. But he just couldn't live in the background without getting the credit for what he had created. So anyway, it was a great movie. Highly recommended. Back to our regularly scheduled program here, Janet. All right.
So obviously that is not a good alpha whisperer
at
all.
Very bad choice. Very, very bad choice. So, okay, FDR, great quote, advisors need a passion for anonymity. What else distinguishes the whisperer from the alpha?
Whisperers are exceptional listeners. This is another thing that separates the alpha whisperers from the alphas. Whisperers, because they are exceptional listeners, they understand the value of timing. They know when to speak and when to remain silent.
Yeah. That's another lesson most of us could stand to learn.
Exactly. Yeah. They're exceptional listeners, and they also know and practice this innately, I guess, because they know that they have the exclusive ear of the alphas.
Yes, and that is definitely a privileged space to be, where you know that you're going to have that one-on-one time with them, so they can afford to wait. They will eventually have their window.
Exactly.
Okay, what else?
Whisperers are really emotionally intelligent. Their EQ, so to speak, right?
Yes.
Their emotional quotient. Yeah. Their EQ is so high that they are great at reading situations, understanding human dynamics, which is very important, and managing both their own emotions and other people's emotions, in this case, the alpha's emotion.
Yes. And, in leadership, we talk so often about the importance of managing up. And of course,
Yes.
managing to the side, managing the people below you, but the ability to figure out how I tell my own assistants, okay, you need to kind of manage me here. I need you to keep me focused. I need you to help me with these kinds of things. So the
Yeah.
alpha whisperers themselves have to really be able to manage that. This is something very relatable, I think, for all of us.
Exactly, yeah. So you could imagine how unique of a trait this is, right? To have that really high emotional intelligence as an alpha whisperer, because there's a lot of things. Yes, they're operating from behind the scene, but there's a lot of things that are going on while they're interacting with the alpha to give the best decision, to give the best advice, to influence the alpha, to go for the best advice coming from them as whisperers. So again, like what we said earlier, right? It's managing the human dynamics with the alpha, managing the situation, reading the situation, and understanding what dynamics are in play here,
Sure.
interacting with their alpha. Yeah.
So it sounds like they also need to have a lot of empathy as part of that EQ.
Exactly, yes. Thank you for bringing that up, Laura. Yes, so they connect with the alpha's motivations is where empathy comes in. Yeah, they're very attuned with their alphas. They understand the needs and challenges that comes not only with giving this advice to the alpha, but also of the advice itself or their whisper. That's what we mean when we say empathy. So again, it's managing both their alpha and the whisper that they're giving to the alpha. And so with this, you need a lot of a healthy dose of empathy.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. Anything
Yeah.
else?
Yeah. Another top of the list trait of an alpha whisperer is discretion.
Okay. That's pretty self-explanatory, but tell me where this is most crucial for the whisperers.
Well, again, we've said earlier that whisperers offer counsel, right? Whether officially or unofficially, they offer the counsel and advice without seeking recognition. And with that comes discretion. They've embraced their role in the entire decision-making dynamics where even if the entire decision comes from them and the alpha executes that decision, it's the alpha that gets all the recognition and the credit, right?
Sure.
Not the whisperer. So in that way, this kind of discretion is really at play. And what that results to then is building that deep trust with the alpha, knowing that whatever they say or do or anything in between with the alpha whisperers in that entire process of decision making, that they can trust the whisperers to be very discreet about everything that's going on.
And it's also about not just needing credit or whatnot, but just, can I trust you to not tell anybody what we're discussing right now? Again, not for the surreptitious kind of secrecy, but just right now, this is still in progress. So let's not leak out all sorts of stuff that's going to get, twisted in the wrong direction, or that's going to create people talking about stuff they don't need to be talking about yet. There's timing that matters. So it just appropriateness and being able to keep your mouth quiet, not being a gossip, not being all those kinds of things. Do you have that sense of discretion? So a great word for that. Anything else?
Just a very funny illustration of that, when they say that there's a reason why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yes.
That's pretty much illustrative of this kind of discretion that is intrinsic to an alpha whisperer.
Yes, that should be there on their business card or something nowadays.
Exactly.
2 ears, 1 mouth, right. And I think we've all heard that at some point or another, and it's been aimed toward us for sure.
Yes.
At least for me, I'll speak for myself. So anything else on the qualities of the alpha whisperer uniquely?
Well, one last thing I wanted to point out is loyalty. When we talk about loyalty, of course, it goes both ways, right?
Sure.
It goes for the bad alphas or the good alphas. But what I'm trying to say is there is that intrinsic embedded into the DNA kind of a loyalty that alpha whisperers have within them. That no matter what happens, they are loyal not just to the whisper that they give to the alphas, but to the alphas themselves.
Yes.
And again, like I said, there's many ways that we can describe loyalty, and it goes both ways where their loyalty rests. But that sense of loyalty is just raw when it comes to the alpha whispers. And this has been proven throughout history.
And I think it matters. What I'm hearing you say, of course, is that loyalty in itself is essential. There's always a matter of, well, how much do you think for yourself versus where's the line? And any trait like we talked about before with decisiveness. So where decisiveness is great, but taken to an extreme becomes my way or the highway, loyalty itself is necessary for security purposes and everything else, but taken to its extreme also. Look, if I know you're embezzling $1 million or $1 billion or $1 trillion or however much it is, at what point does my loyalty now need to shift a little bit? Is this not in the best interest of everybody else? Embezzlement, last time I checked, is not something that's usually sanctioned in too many places. So there's a time and a place to make a decision for yourself. But the healthy version of loyalty is necessary.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what about some of the historical examples? Let's dig in and find some specific people where we can look at the dynamics between the alpha and the whispers. Who's a great example of this?
Well, one very good example is between President Woodrow Wilson and Edward Colonel House. Colonel, that's his nickname that time. President Wilson called him Colonel. They had a really distinctive dynamic as an alpha and a whisperer, so much so that President Wilson actually called Mr. House his second personality. He said that, Colonel House is his independent self. His thoughts and mine are one. That was him quoted exactly. So that's how strong their relationship was as an alpha and a whisperer. And it has resulted in really impactful decisions worth mentioning, part of history. Their collaboration actually resulted in establishing the League of Nations after World War I. And as I'm sure a lot of listeners know, this League of Nations was the predecessor to what we now know as the United Nations, which was, of course, established after the World War II. So this kind of very powerful, trusted relationships between President Woodrow Wilson as the alpha and Colonel House as the whisperer had resulted in this historic creation of a League of Nations and now the United Nations.
It was their chemistry that was in great part what facilitated that creation. That's what I'm understanding?
Yes, exactly. And their chemistry, like what you said, can be described as complementary personalities, right? As both an alpha and a whisperer. Well, Wilson reveled in the limelight. He loved public speaking. He loved to be out there, typical of an alpha, like we described earlier, right? Whereas Colonel House preferred to be behind the scene, and he actually was not fond of public speaking, and he did not like speeches. So it was a very complementary alpha and alpha whisperer personality, what they had.
So it sounds like they shared a mind, but not the microphone.
Exactly. Yeah, that's that's a great way to put it. Exactly. Yes. That dynamics. Yes. Yes.
So what's another example?
Well, another example that also impacted our history as far as the relationships and dynamics between an alpha and the whisperer is actually President Nixon and Henry Kissinger.
Interesting. Okay, tell me how.
Well, during that time, Nixon had almost like an unlimited trust in Kissinger as his advisor, specifically for foreign affairs and international relations, right? That because of this alignment and their respective views of the world, there's similarly a moral approach to foreign policy.
Let me make sure that I'm hearing that right. This is a similarly amoral, meaning like not relevant or not in consideration of morals, or immoral, meaning going straight against morals.
Exactly.
The
Amoral.
first one. Okay, got it.
Yeah,
the
first one.
Good.
Amoral
Okay.
approach
Got it.
to foreign policy. Exactly.
Got
So
it.
it was just all about the issues. It
Got
has
it.
nothing to do with what's wrong or what's right.
So they shared that view, and that gave them good chemistry together.
Exactly. So much so that because of this shared and aligned approach to foreign policy, as an example, he ran foreign policy and Nixon gave him the free hand to do all this, actually. And that's why during that time, it was said that when you talk about international policies, it's a Nixon-Kissinger policy and none other.
And not a Nixon-Ford policy where Ford was Nixon's vice president. It's like, who's Ford? We don't know. It's Nixon-Kissinger. That's the ticket.
Exactly.
That's the administration. Okay, wow.
Yeah.
I bet Ford felt lovely about that. That's nice. Nice. Thank you very much to the VP there.
Exactly. It was so aligned that during those times, it was almost always impossible to determine whether Nixon or Kissinger made foreign policy decisions. That's how trusted of a relationship they had together.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yes.
It can be that tight. Now, when we look at the historical examples, we look at the past, we look at the present, we look in the future. From the past to the present, what worked then? And as far as the nature of the role of the whisperer, what stood the test of time? And what has kind of evolved since the beginning, or since the past at least? What no longer applies today? Let's start with what worked.
Well, Laura, one thing that really worked and still works is discretion. This is something you can never take away from the Alpha Whisperer's DNA.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Sure.
And still applies. Yeah. That sense of discretion. It comes with the job. It comes with the appointment. It is almost an unspoken rule to have this baked into the DNA of an Alpha Whisperer. Discretion.
Okay. Makes sense. What else?
Yeah. And that's followed up, of course, with loyalty. Right? Yes. Automatic loyalty comes with that discretion. Having that strategic insight. You cannot be a whisperer, especially when we talk about the leadership context, without having that strategic insight. Otherwise, the Alpha will not need your whisper.
Right. That's their job,
Yeah.
is to make strategic planning.
Exactly. Yeah. So that stayed strategic insight and very much still into play in the present Alpha Whisperers. And another thing, and really, important, of course, is the emotional intelligence.
Sure.
It has evolved through time, and especially now that we have different kinds of whisperers behind the scene, and we'll talk more about that later. But that emotional intelligence definitely stood the test of time.
So it sounds like what has really been consistent is the qualities, the traits that are necessary to be a top advisor. So the role may or may not have evolved, but the traits stay the same.
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then, then what has changed?
Well, what has changed, and this is a very significant one, is that before there used to be just one Alpha Whisperer for the most part. Specifically, when we talk about leadership, again, going back to what we just said a few minutes ago with the relationship between Wilson and House, right? So that's one whisperer. The relationship between Nixon and Kissinger, that's one major whisperer, so just one person. But now, as time evolved and with the present times, we now have different kinds of experts and advisors and strategists behind the Alpha. So as an example, the President of the United States do not only have one chief senior advisor, he has so many others, a representative of every department of our government, as an example. With this kind of consulting with the wide range of experts, it reflects the modern need for diverse perspectives, of course. So it has changed, yes.
So what I'm hearing is that the biggest change in the role over time has been with regard to the degree of exclusivity, where the whisperer used to have exclusive access to the president, prime minister, queen's ear, etc., where now there's lots of other people who also have input that could be conflicting with the input of the whisperer. Does that sound accurate?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it is, Laura. Yeah.
Okay. So then when we look from there into the future, all that in mind, Janet, how do you see the role of the Alpha Whisperer continuing to evolve, and what's your vision for that role?
Thank you, Laura. This is actually a very, very important question. I see the new breed of Alpha Whisperers as having more transparency and accountability. I go back to my call to action, where just because you are operating from behind the scene as whisperers doesn't mean that you are less accountable for the whisper that you give to the alpha. So I want there to be more accountability and responsibility on the part of the whisperers, that they make their whispers more intentional. And I know it's easier said than done a lot of times, especially at high stakes situations, at the Oval Office, the White House, and even with Fortune 500 CEOs having advisors, and they have to decide on profit versus loss, these kinds of things, right? But again, like I said, with the times right now and the situations that we have and the issues that we're facing globally, I am calling on the Alpha Whispers to really have a bigger, more solid sense of transparency and accountability.
Okay. And this is something, of course, that we will probably have to create as a system, because the whisperers themselves are not going to be like, sure, let me tell you everything that I've told this person to do. So systemically, we're going to have to figure out a way to create the structure around the whisperers to enforce and to enable that transparency even to occur. So that'll be an interesting little challenge for for moving into the future.
I know, yeah, exactly. And thank you for pointing that out, Laura. It's actually interesting because, at one point, this sense of discretion, right, is built into the DNA of a whisperer. And now I'm calling for transparency, but those are not mutually exclusive.
Okay, so distinguish them for us.
Just put it out there because, some may say, oh, but you just mentioned that whisperers are discreet, right?
Yeah.
And stuff. So, and now you're saying the new breed of alpha whisperer should be transparent, but they're not mutually exclusive.
Okay, so help me understand real quick. Where's the line between the two? Where should there be more transparency, and how do we do that without losing the discretion?
Right. So when I talk about being more transparent, what I mean is it's forming those whispers or advice or solutions, right? Not based on a self-interest, not based on serving pursuit, right? But really looking into the broader sense of what will work for the greater good. That's what I mean. Yes.
Okay. So it sounds like ethics has to be much more in the forefront of the requirements for the whisperers.
Yes.
The transparency and the ethics.
Exactly. Yeah. Again, with transparency and ethics, then the sense of accountability is stronger and really more solid that way. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any new skills that you feel like the whisperers of tomorrow are going to need?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And it's not just about all of the above that we mentioned earlier, but now more than ever, cross-cultural awareness is one of the key traits, the new skills that the new breed of alpha whisperers have to incorporate in their DNA, pretty much, right? Having that cross-cultural awareness, that intergenerational awareness is also important. This is one of the principles that Alpha Whisperers was created for, to have that intergenerational awareness, and of course, AI. So being able to tap, and I know this is a broad topic and we'll be touching on this in our future episodes when we focus on the new breed of Alpha Whisperers, but I really wanted to already put that front and center out there, that with the new skills needed to be an effective alpha whisperer, you have to incorporate digital literacy and AI into your decision making.
There's, between the intercultural awareness and the AI focused digital literacy, I don't know how anybody can expect to interact with anybody outside of their own household, if even that nowadays, without having some semblance of awareness and skill in both of those areas. The world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller, as they say, and you certainly can't lead if you don't have those pieces, because it just shows that you haven't gone anywhere yourself.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
That would be difficult. Okay, so, Janet, my goodness, we've had the most amazing conversation today. We've looked at the unique traits of alphas themselves, the traits of the whisperers, the essential qualities that make them successful, and the evolving dynamics, the chemistry between the two. So what I'd love to do is to just invite the audience, everybody out there, if you are listening and reflecting on what we talked about today, I ask you to consider, what traits do you personally embody in your own leadership or in your own advising when you're guiding others or attempting to guide them. So how can you develop more of those essential traits of the current and future next generation new breed of alpha whisperers? And for that matter, how can you help others develop them? As a leader, part of our job is to develop others, to help people on our team become their best selves and achieve their ultimate potential. How do you help them incorporate these most essential qualities of the great alpha whisperers along the way? So there's my little challenge to everybody else out there. Janet, any final thoughts for us today?
Well, again, because I'm so passionate about building a pipeline of a new breed of alpha whisperers, Laura, it's just really moving forward. We want alpha whisperers who have better sense of accountability when they give out the whisper to the alpha.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
So transparency and accountability is our theme moving forward, the need for it ever more in today's day and age, which is hard when you can fake just about anything. You can hide just about anything. So we really have to be extremely conscious about not letting that happen.
Yes, exactly.
Putting everything above board. That's great. So with that, everyone, I invite you to subscribe if you have not done that already. Rate the podcast, please. Share it with others and share with us your thoughts on the episode. We'd love to hear your insights, your takeaways, your questions, and other things moving forward with this. So Janet, where can people go to learn more?
You can go to alphawhisperer.com. alphawhisperershouse.com. We are also on Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. And if you want to know more of Janet C. Salazar, personally, you can go to my website, janetsalazar.co. And I'm on LinkedIn as well, and we can connect there.
Amazing, amazing. I can't wait until the next conversation. Looking forward to having everybody else join us for that as well. So thank you for tuning in, everybody, to explore the power behind the power. You're listening to Alpha Whisperers Genesis.